Part of the library collections we've got in the exhibition for the history of psychedelia, so influences on it. So that's things like Aubrey Beardsley, a lot of Victorian literature and even children's books. So Alice in Wonderland, we've got like a pop-up version of that from the Victorian period. The other big one is Art Nouveau, so poster design, even furniture and things like that. Sort of the design and the art forms of them kind of influenced and informed psychedelic art, really. And it was a big explosion of youth culture. I think it was one of the first youth cultures where almost every media had involvement from the youth, so as well as music, obviously, artworks, but also producing their own press was kind of a really big thing for me, as well as obviously literature. But having their own underground press was like a first, so that's one really big thing. But also the fact that all the different media seem to mix and influence each other, so an album would influence some writing, a rock performance would influence, say, a painting. You know, it's a time where things seem to like break down in terms of boundaries between the arts. From students' point of view, a big point of it all is to say that, you know, the work they're producing has importance. So it might not mean something to them at the moment, and the culture that they're currently in, they take it for granted a lot of the time, but actually it will be recorded, and probably, you know, in another 30 or 40 years' time, people will be putting exhibitions on around grime culture or whatever they're into at the moment, like hip-hop culture. So it's a cycle, really. So, yeah.
Well, we're on the visual communications floor, so that's illustration, graphic students, and the students walk past this part of the floor all the time, and it's kind of really influencing them just by it being here. Students are working on their dissertations at the moment, and they've suddenly realised that this period is actually really quite interesting in terms of print quality, in terms of political messages. The role of women in psychedelia is quite a challenging one. So it's begun to make them think simply by its existence, rather than having any kind of overt lecture about it, but just having the amazing qualities of it. And we've got a lot of original materials that are they really sing to the students, the colour, the pattern, the complexity of the visual. And just by their material presence, it's really made an impact on them.
I think it was a time when, following the Beatles, everybody kind of followed the Beatles into this new culture, a youth culture, and it was a culture for the first time. Young people had access to art, to literature, to bands that could write their own music. They had access to this alternative politics, alternative ways of living. It's like there's a kind of revolution in the head, to borrow the title of a very famous book. It was a revolution in the head, but it was also a revolution in culture. Culture loosened up and opened up for the first time. And lots of things were accessible to young people, which had never been accessible to them before. Art, literature, science even, chemistry, for example, if you like, played a big part in 1967. But all these fields were opened up for the first time, and I think that's why 67 is that year that we'll look back on and think this is where modern culture, if you like postmodern culture, was born, because young people had a whole culture to themselves for the first, separate from the mainstream culture.